One Arm's host bled from countless wounds, an endless campaign. Successive defeats followed by even costlier victories. But of all the wounds borne by the army of Dujek One Arm, those to its soul were the gravest.
What up, and welcome back to another Malazan Book of the Fallen video. This is Memories of Ice, Chapter 2. Let's get into it. As per usual, we're going to go through the chapter itself, and then we'll give a spoiler warning for all the newbies so that they know when to jump out, so we can talk about all the luscious spoilers that happen during these first few chapters. Chapter 2, I would argue, is just a continuation of the introduction that we start with in Chapter 1, where we're getting the lay of the land and the characters, except for Chapter 2 is an introduction to the Bridgeburners, who are, or maybe a reintroduction to the Bridgeburners that are stationed outside of Pale. And they're kind of divided into two groups. The first group is Picker and Blend's group, and they're kind of stationed outside of Pale in the kind of mountain passes that might be used as a kind of second route or an alternative route into Pale for merchants and would-be smugglers. And they're there to basically restore order after the big battle, collect taxes, and also resupply the army that is still there. And we get this introduction to Picker and Blend, who are basically running a confidence operation on poor old Monog. He's this merchant who's traveling through the region, purportedly going to Pale. They search him. He talks about how there's a new god at a temple that's just been sanctified to Treach. He has some new torques for this new god that are blessed, supposedly. Picker wants them, so she buys them off Monog, because these are obviously like magical invested jewelry, if you will. And then she searches even more of his stuff. He kind of gets spooked and freaks out, but she ultimately lets him continue on his way.
Danger, Will Robinson.
Monog obviously thinks he got away with one or pulled the wool down over everyone's eyes or whatever, because then he enters a secret cave. He's obviously doing the bidding of some god out there, and he travels into this cave and actually ends up going through a warren and ends up on this kind of nondescript featureless plain. And poor guy has like all these crazy tumors between his legs. We don't know if that means his junk or whatever, but it's clear that the guy is suffering pretty terribly in his service to this god. But he's been tasked basically with a job, and so he shows up and, you know, pulls out all the stuff that he was smuggling past Picker, and there are these cards that he was commissioned to paint by this god who he calls the Fallen One. And so he delivers all of these cards that he painted to this Fallen One, who's like this crippled, disgusting, diseased creature living in this dilapidated tent on this featureless plain. He goes there and shows that he painted all these characters on these cards. We don't know much about them, but we do know that he's painted each one with a bunch of inherent flaws, or each character has an inherent flaw baked in. So then this Fallen One, repays him, or says he did exactly what he wanted, and repays him by grabbing him by the junk and sending this like crazy pain through him, and says, hey, I healed all your tumors and you don't have cancer anymore. The catch is that you're now paralyzed from the waist down, so God bless, and sends him on his way.
That's cold blooded.
Then we go back to Picker and Blend, who basically key us in that they were hustling poor old Monog the whole time, and knew he was shady, knew he was hiding something, and let him go on his way because they actually used one of Quick Ben's little enchanted rocks to place a tracker on him. And they also like reveal that they were playing another little confidence operation by planting all these seeds about where it might be easier to get through, and all this little intelligence pieces that hopefully these smugglers and traders would, pass along to each other as rumor, essentially. And so they were playing them from that standpoint, too, because they're driving them right into the lap of the other group of bridge burners that are holding down the fort along the main road there. We find out a little bit more about just the context and the armies in this resupply holding pattern from the events of Gardens of the Moon. Quick Ben regroups with Picker and Blend and tells them they're morons essentially for putting on these torques, or that Picker is, and calling down the attention of a god with God blessed jewelry. We find that Quick Ben has actually recently been promoted to Cadre Mage in this new host of Dujek One Arm. He's helping with the administration and to get everything together. He's building an intelligence network and doing all kinds of stuff. And he reminds us that they're kind of consolidating to be able to take on this common enemy in the Panian Daman with what used to be their old enemies of Animander Rake and Kaladin Brood. He asks Picker and Blend what happens to his rock, and they say, "You tell me, that's your tracker." And he goes off in search of it and finds himself in this warren on this nondescript or featureless plane. He sees the tent of this fallen one, and obviously his curiosity gets the better of him. He goes in there. The fallen one says, "Yo, look, I know what you're here for, and I got your tracker." He's like, "It's probably not good to let someone like me maintain a link to you." And so Quick Ben's like, "Yeah, so you want a deal?" He's like, what are you offering in return for my rock?" He's like, "Heck yeah, I want something in return." He's like, "Since I have to sit here," and he refers to himself as chained, and that the gods of his world have chained him, of Quick Ben's world, have chained this fallen one, and so people have to pay a consequence for that, and he wants Quick to help him with that. And instead, Quick Ben hits him in the grill with like 7 warrens at once and just straight up obliterates him and like burns all of his hair and face and chunks of him off, grabs his rock, and then immediately dips out.
And his name is John C.
This god is obviously not one to be trifled with, right? So he comes firing back immediately. Quick had like 7 warrens out on him at once, and this guy bounces back almost immediately. He's like grabbing Quick and dragging him back towards this tent, and it all looks like it's gonna be game over. But then a hand like comes out of the ground, grabs Quick, and drags him down into the earth. And what we find out through the rest of this chapter is that he's been dragged down into the flesh of Burn herself, of Mother Earth. He's been summoned by these beings who are basically these big old 15, 20 foot tall creatures that are like holding up her, I don't know, it's kind of like, a stent or something, holding the veins open so the blood can flow or whatever, but they're basically like the structures holding up the flesh, and that they're slowly dying off. And so they have summoned Quick Ben down there because they're looking for reinforcements, because this the fallen one is basically a cancer to the flesh of Burn, and it's metastasizing. And so his whole mission is to just take down everything in this world in revenge and anger over what happened to him, and he's manifesting that by poisoning the world itself. Quick Ben's like, and then they're like, "Dude, this is happening like immediate, we have to act now." And Quick Ben's like, "Oh my gosh, like how much time do we have?" And they're like, "Only like 10 or a couple decades." And he's like, "Oh my god." But so for him, on his scale of relative time, he's got some time to maneuver, but for them who operate on eons, it's obviously much quicker. But either way, he takes it to heart that their fight is kind of his fight, and that he's going to get in the game, as it were, when it comes to helping to protect Burn. And before he leaves, he actually leaves that rock that he just got back from Monog in the body of Burn herself, so that later he can come back and continue that fight. Presumably he goes back to Picker and Blend and kind of warns his way back to them. And he's clearly visibly shaken, and that in and of itself kind of scares the crap out of Picker and Blend.
I have seen that'll turn you white.
And then finally, after Quick emerges, we link back up with Ganoes Paran for the first time since Gardens of the Moon. He's manning the other outpost, right, on the main road into Pale. And unfortunately, Guy is not doing too good. And so he's kind of guarding this other route while the Picker and Blend and Ansi's team are guarding the back route into Pale. But he's just really in terrible shape. He's got this crazy PTSD from everything that happened in Gardens of the Moon. He, seeing Tattersail be dead and come back, seeing the Hound disappear into shadow, being caught in Dragnipur, being stabbed and resurrected, has all kind of taken its toll and all been a pretty crazy ordeal for our boy Ganoes Paran.
It's just a lot. It's a lot to overcome.
But regardless, it's clear that his ordeal has taken quite the toll on him. He links up with Trots, who's another Bridgeburner who we're really getting to know for the first time here in Memories of Ice. And I love this intro to Trots because he's all hopped up on testosterone and being very enigmatic, and it's pretty funny. He's part of this plot that Whiskey Jack and Dewjack are all cooking up, and he won't spill the beans, and Paran desperately wants to find out what's going on. He's kind of in a bad way psychologically, right? He's questioning the overall goal and why are they the purpose of taking on the Panny and Daman. He thinks they could just leave it to take care of itself the way that, cults like this always do. Starts to think about his hatred for the Empire and his resentment for everything that went down in Gardens of the Moon, wondering if he should get active there. He decides to kind of abandon that train of thought and just trust Tavor to deal with it, who, as a side note, he seems to have like a tremendous amount of confidence in. We get some really nice Trots and Hedge interaction, and we don't get a lot of Hedge, I think, up to this point, but he still won't spill the beans about the parlay to Hedge either. We get a tiny taste of Whiskey Jack, who Paran kind of shows up to report into and tells him that he's gonna fold the rest of the 9th Squad, which used to be Whiskey Jack's squad, in with Ansi Picker Blend squad and just make it one big squad because there's only 38 Bridgeburners essentially left. Whiskey Jack gives them the option to not take over the Bridgeburners because they don't particularly like nobles and are likely to potentially symbolically and metaphorically as well as literally backstab him, but he takes the job on anyway and says, he looks forward to the opportunity to like win their trust or some sappy thing like that. But God bless him, Ganoes, just a good guy.
Must be hard being brothers. I would not.
But then literally like 30 seconds later, Detoran steps up and totally like clowns him by ignoring him in the chain of command and talking to Whiskey Jack directly. Whiskey Jack's like, dude, come on, you totally just disrespected, you talked to your captain. And she's like, oh, my bad. But you can see that Ganoes has a lot of hard work ahead of him. Mallet kind of comes in after the fact and debriefs Whiskey Jack about just how Ganoes is just like rife with all this magic and stuff swirling in and out of him. And he's really jacked up and they're pretty worried about him. But for the time being, they're just going to keep an eye on him essentially and see what they can do. And then it all ends with Mallet offering and Whiskey Jack kind of ignoring to invest in himself. So quite a lot happening in these first couple of chapters. It's so exciting to get into this book, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. I find this one to be a real page turner, and I hope you do too. So we're going to leave it there for the newbies. If you don't want spoilers, jump out now while we talk some of the foreshadowing that took place in these first couple of chapters. lot of spoiler stuff in these first couple chapters, but a lot of just build up too, so I won't go too crazy. But so awesome to see Gruntle and Stawny again, and Harlow, the namesake, and just to kind of be, getting together with these folks who become such stalwarts of the whole series and have such great stories to tell. It's cool to go back in with eyes wide open and just be able to actually appreciate them on these rereads. But yeah, just so many people getting introduced, right? Bauchelain, Korbal, Broach, Port Emancipor, Reese. We have Karuli. And Krull is just pulling strings from day one, the same way that he was back in Gardens of the Moon with his boy Pran Colt and all of that stuff, and Silver Fox and blah, blah, blah. There was also a lot of cool Talk moments. I thought, it was really interesting to think about Talk and his own internal monologue where he was referring to himself more as a soldier and also referencing how he had kind of left the Claw behind, because I think that some ways Talk's storyline gets a lot of grief for being arbitrary, or like I see the argument like, why would someone just go off and try and infiltrate the Panty and Daman? His whole thing was he was really trying to, and as he had been during the first book, a lot of the arc that Talk had was kind of forswearing his allegiances with the Claw and going with the more kind of morally right, or this brotherhood of folks who look out for each other and we're kind of doing it for the right reasons, and that I think underscores a lot of his motivations during Memories of Ice that might seem a bit stupid and crazy, like to go out and try and do this, but he was all gung-ho to rejoin the army and kind of become re-solidify as part of that brotherhood, I guess. I love how, like, Tool also immediately, for whatever reason, just decides to take Talk under his wing in the kind of Talon IMAS Big Brother program, right? Because Talk just wakes up and he's like, dude, I need all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, I'll help you make all these weapons. And that is how they end up, like, forging this bond and friendship that's so strong, even though it happens just in the first chunk of 1 out of 10 books. But it's so gripping, or it feels so real that it creates all kinds of tension and drama at the end when they, when Talk doesn't recognize them, and then of course later on after the whole Red Mask stuff, when Talk eventually does go down for good in a way, that is so tragic. That's all based on the kind of few hundred pages of friendship development that we get in this book. So all those folks who say that Erickson doesn't do characters good, and we all know and love you, but that, I would argue, as a piece of evidence in favor of his character work. And can I just say how much I love, like, absolutely love Picker and Blend, right? Because you have Picker, who's like this aloof smartass who kind of is playing it so well, but at the same time is super observant and actually knows exactly what's going on and kind of plays Monog like a fiddle. And I love her relationship with Blend, right? Because it's total opposite attracts, because she's the more fiery one who, is making all these smart ass comments, whereas Blend is more reserved, having just more snark kind of in response, but that they really complement each other so well and actually make a really effective team, especially when you look at how well they played Monog. I'm also embarrassed that, like, the first couple times I didn't see through the whole Dujek gone rogue outlaw plot, given how many times it's alluded to, both in Deadhouse Gates when Callum meets with Lysine, I think several other times, honestly, through Gardens of the Moon, and now here again in just the first couple of chapters of Memories of Ice, where Quick is questioning the outlawry, where Ganoes is questioning it. How was I not already connecting the dots on this stuff? That it was really a clever ploy to bring enemies together as friends. And again, go watch my Lysine video, but one of the things that I think makes the Empress very underrated, because it could have been a brilliant plan if not for some shenanigans thrown in along the way. And then last thing is just Ganoes Paran, right? Because so much of what he does in this chapter is foreshadowing. He talks about the secret heart, Rake's secret heart of Dragnipur, and where the Hounds went into total darkness, and that is Rake's secret. That's pretty good foreshadowing for Toll the Hounds there. And also just all of his visions, right? He was seeing the Panion's sister in the rift in Morn. He was seeing Tattersail being reborn. He was hearing the Hounds of Shadow barking out from the darkness, and maybe a nod to the Daragoth or the two that merge with the Hounds of Shadow. So just a lot of cool reintroductions for me, but also build up for the foreshadowing that's to come. So we'll leave it there. I know this was a long one, but thank you so much for watching. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, join the Discord, buy some merch, become a patron or a member of the channel. Share these videos with some friends so that they get more roped into the books. That's the ultimate goal. And until next time, happy reading.